The IDF has identified 3 launches from Gaza at Israel that had landed in open areas. There were no reports of injuries or damage. The launches came shortly after the death of a senior leader of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad was announced in Israeli custody on Tuesday following an 86-day hunger strike. Khadr Adnan was found unresponsive in his cell in Nitzan jail in the central city of Ramle during the pre-dawn hours of Tuesday morning. He was brought to the Shamir Medical Center outside Tel Aviv and underwent resuscitation efforts, but was declared dead at the hospital. That's according to the prison service. 45-year-old Adnan was arrested in February in his hometown of Arabeh in the northern West Bank near Jenin for suspected membership in a terror group, support for a terror organization, and incitement. He had been indicted and was being held in prison for the 10th time until the end of legal proceedings against him. He launched his hunger strike immediately after his arrest on February 5th and had refused to undergo medical checks or receive treatment. Jonathan Regg, of Defense Correspondent, joins us here in studio. Let's talk about the potential for escalation from this onwards. We're seeing the launches from Gaza this morning. Are we expected to see further retaliation from the Islamic Jihad? Also an incident, I understand, this morning in the West Bank.
Very good question with no clear answer. What we do know is that this senior Islamic Jihad prisoner, as you mentioned, was found dead in his cell. Minutes later, 20 minutes, 30 minutes after the announcement, rockets were already fired from Gaza, meaning the Islamic Jihad was waiting for that. What will happen now? A very big question. First, there was no Israeli retaliation as of now. The rockets were fired roughly 3 hours ago. No retaliation yet. Some of the latest rockets fired from Gaza went by with no retaliation from Israel. But what will happen now? There was no retaliation from Israel, not only on the military level, but also on the civilian level. If we remember, in the previous government under Benny Gantz's defense minister, sometimes the areas crossing was closed. More people came in to work in Israel. Less people came in to work in Israel. This time, no response, and as of the moment, no response from Israel. If there will be a response, it has to be we have to see how harsh it will be and what will the Islamic Jihad do with that. We do know that at least for the short term, Israel does not expect more rockets to be fired from Gaza. How do we know? Because the directives to all of the citizens living in the regional councils on the Gaza border and in the city of Sderot is that today, business as usual, no further instructions. For the long run, of course, another question also, what will Hamas do? This prisoner came from the ranks of the Islamic Jihad. There's no doubt that the rockets were this morning were fired by the Islamic Jihad. Hamas, yes, would probably want to let the Islamic Jihad let some steam, but will it want to go itself into a violent round with Israel? The estimates are that probably no. All this is very nice, what we're saying, but we're speaking rational stuff in the Middle East. Rational and what really happens on the ground sometimes collide.
And more details about what happened this morning in the West Bank. What do we know?
Yes, a shooting on an Israeli car, on a few Israeli cars in a road in the West Bank. It may not be directly connected to what we saw this morning from Gaza. We know that these shooting bys, unfortunately, have become quite a common phenomena in the West Bank. So it may be connected to what happened this morning. It may not be connected. Once there's a funeral, I think we can expect clashes in the West Bank, and all eyes are on Gaza. What will the Islamic Jihad do from there? And what we learned over in Ramadan, it doesn't always end in Gaza. Islamic Jihad is also present in Lebanon and Syria. There's many arenas.
Yeah, you mentioned Syria. Thank you, Jonathan. So Israel launched airstrikes against the airport in the northern Syrian city of Aleppo on Monday night, killing 1 soldier and leaving 7 others wounded. That's according to Syrian state media. It said the airport was out of service due to heavy damage caused by the strikes. According to Syria, the attacks left 1 Syrian soldier dead and wounded another 5 soldiers and 2 civilians. And of course, while Israel's military doesn't comment on specific strikes, it has admitted conducting hundreds of strikes against Iranian targets in Syria. Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Doron Avital, the former commander of the Special Forces in the IDF, joins us now from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much for being with us. Let's talk about these two separate events this morning. As mentioned, just another attack in Syria. Hard to count already, the number of attacks. How long can Israel expect to continue conducting these attacks in Syria without getting retaliation from Hezbollah or from Iran directly? And also with regards to the prisoner this morning, I'd like your comments on that. The senior in the Islamic Jihad dying after a hunger strike, 86 days into his strike. How is this expected to influence the situation on the ground? It's already quite tense, as we know.
No, it's hard to anticipate the future, but I think we went through the holidays. We had the feeling that things are calming down, but you can't anticipate whether some event like the death of the jihad prisoner can be the spark of some escalation. We have like four fronts, basically. We have Hamas in the south, we have Jihad Islamic also in the south, we have Hezbollah in the Lebanese border, we have the attempts, the Iranian attempt, Hezbollah attempts in Syria, and we have the West Bank, which is always every day, a day or two, we have some incidents. So I think the tensions are very high. And I want to remind our viewers that the first intifada started from an accident. So it's hard to anticipate what would be the spark that would cause an escalation. I think we're afraid of escalation. The common wisdom is that neither Hamas nor Hezbollah wants an escalation, but things can get out of hand for sure.
There's been discussion about the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad identifying the weakness in Israeli society and in this government. Israelis are on the streets. Outside of Israel, this can be interpreted as the beginning of a civil war, though, of course, Israeli leadership says it's a testimony of how fierce our democracy is. What are analysts saying, and how do you see the situation vis-a-vis the Palestinian perception and the regional perception of what's happening in Israel?
No, I think the unrest in Israel contributes to the way we are viewed from through the eyes of our enemies, and the unrest is real. I don't know, some people call it the Israeli Spring. I'm not sure whether this is the term, but this is real, and also it affects the way the government conducts its business. I'm not sure that the Minister of our National Security Affairs is the most competent guy for the job in those very tough and very delicate situations. I wasn't sure, for example, that the measure that he took in terms of the conditions of arrest of prisoners really contribute to calming the situation. So we have a government that is under tension, attacked by the civil unrest. We have enemies looking from afar. I think the situation is alarming and worrisome for sure. And there's no question about the Israeli unrest contributing to the overall situation.
Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Doron Avital, thank you very much for joining us. Jonathan, thank you very much